First of all, hello, everyone, for being here and listening to me. I will try to share my screen as well. Today I will talk about a particular man, Dragoman Ali Bey, who lived in the early 16th century. And he had a lot of relations across the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, let's say. But unfortunately, unlike Anna's protagonist, he didn't leave any diary. He just left one letter, but glimpses of his life and his missions can be perceived from the diary of Marino Sanudo, a very famous source, as you know it. So first of all, what does he do? Who is this man, this Dragoman Ali Bey? And what does a Dragoman means? So that's what I would like to look in this presentation. Okay, so first of all, Ali Bey's, I say it CV because that's literally his life. He was born in the island of Santa Maura it's Lefkada, it's in Greece, as a nephew of a Signor Leonardo Barbaro. It's not certain if he's a member of the Venetian nobility or not, but so he was born in either 1455 or 1465. It's again debatable what his year is, but he died certainly in 1525 in Constantinople because of plague. And the other thing is he spoke Italian and Latin fluently, which was referenced a lot in the Diario. So, and he appeared as a dragoman or turziman from volume 2 to volume 41 in the diary of Marino Sanudo. Not in every volume, but he appears quite a lot in the mostly in the letters of the bylaws or the ambassadors that's stationed in Istanbul. And he also, before passing into the diary, he also appeared in the İnamat Defteri, so in the Ottoman sources itself, which İnamat Defteri as I said, there is a register that listed money, valuable fabrics, and gifts that were granted to the state officials, foreign ambassadors, members of the imperial family, religious officials, artists, and poets. It's an important source that lists those gifts. So he received these inams, which are grants or gifts, and he exists there, especially during the reign of Bayezid II in 1503 to 1511. Where the lists are very, very precise, unlike the lists in the reign of Selim I and Suleiman I. So he's there. He appears to have received 1,000 aspers yearly, except from the year 1506 and 1511. He's also listed with other dragomans, so interpreters, whose names are Iskandar, Hassan, and Ibrahim. So he was not the only one that was employed. And an interesting, let's say, not important part is in this İnamat Defteri, all these interpreters were listed as dragomans. But the dragoman is the word it's used by the Italians. And so let me first pass. So the word itself, it's a dragoman word. The word itself is from the Arabic word terjuman, which has its roots in the Aramaic word targam, which means translate. So as you can see, it added into other Middle Eastern languages like Hebrew or Assyrian. And it's a very old word. It means to translate. And it existed from the time of the Abbasids. And then from the Arabic, it entered into medieval Spanish and Valencian dialect as these. And then through there, it exists as dragoman. But in the Ottoman İnamat Defteri, all the translators were listed as dragomans, not as terjumans, which they did in the later İnamat Defteris in 1530s, when the Ottoman bureaucracy started to get more and more consolidated, and they have their own other lists. Because in this first list, which Ali Bey was participating in, he was listed with the other scribes of the Imperial Council. So it is so the word itself is an interesting case of how a word was transferred within the Eastern Mediterranean, because the Ottomans are using the Italian words, whereas the Italians, sorry, Whereas the Italians are using both words. It's Dragoman or Turziman, which is again a distorted version of the name Tercüman. So what does a translator do apart from translating? He can be a meditator and a facilitator, a news source of gatherer, an ambassador, or a hub of a diplomatic network. So which all of these things, which are not his official works of a dragoman, are all can be applied to Ali Bey. And he's a very, very early example of how a middle rank officer in the Ottoman bureaucracy can act as an important member of the diplomatic negotiations, even though he was not a major actor. He was just there, his role there being a translator. So I made this very basic map to show you what he was up to, this Ali Bey was up to in the first 2 decades of the 16th century. So we can see that that he participated in negotiations as interpreter in several ways. And first he participated here. And these days are important because 1499 is just before the beginning of the Ottoman-Venetian War. He was there as a translator between the bylaw and the ambassador and the viziers to approve the peace, but we know that it's not going to last for long. And the other 2 negotiations he participated are in 1503 is for the end of the war, because the Venetians are defeated, they want the war to be ended, so they're doing all these negotiations in order to end the war, and Ali Bey is there as an interpreter between the ambassadors and the viziers. So I just took this, okay, so these are just several examples. So I just look at this one, this particular example, because this is a failed negotiation, which is interesting. So in this negotiations, the Venice sends Zaccaria de Freschi. He's a secretario, he's not an ambassador because he's not a member of the patrician class. And the other important actors are Hersekzade Ahmet Pasha, who's the Grand Vizier for the 2nd time there, and Ali Bey, who acted as a translator. So the problem is that the island of Santa Maura, which is also the homeland of our Ali Bey, which was under the control of Ottomans since 1476 or 9, I don't remember, was taken by the Venetians during the war. So the Ottomans wanted this island back, and they don't want to move forward without taking the island. So this is a problem, and they say this. And Zaccaria de Freschi told them that he doesn't have the authority to say that yes, the Venice can give you the island. So he says I have to refer back to my superiors in Venice. And of course, Hersekzade Ahmet Pasha, he's not very happy about this, and he wants it to be done very quickly. So this is a very charged environment. So in this very charged environment, Ali Bey, he acted as a mediator. So after all these official talks, he talks with Zaccaria de Freschi, saying that you Venetians were the cause of this war, but we can do this. You can do this arrangement. You just have to give the island, so that we can confirm the peace that was done with Andrea Zancani, which is the peace that was done in 1499. So, but after that, there is this ciphered letters crisis, which Freschi's letters, ciphered letters that arrived from Venice, were intercepted by the Ottomans. And they got translated and presented to the Sultan, big problem. And of course, the Sultan was furious because they were talking in a ciphered way. And then Freschi stayed in the house of Ali Bey in this scandal, which is an interesting thing, probably to keep an eye on him because Ali Bey himself can speak Italian, so that he can learn what the Freschi's entourage and they were speaking with themselves. So he was put in a house arrest, and he was complaining about it to the Hersekzade Ahmet Pasha, who told him, if you don't get us back the answer by March, there's no talking of any peace. So if you're unhappy of staying in a house, we can put you in a prison. So again, after he left of this again very charged negotiations, Ali said to Freschi, he said, if the Pasha is actually wants his rubies, which were pawned for 4,000 ducats. So if Venice can give back these rubies, you know, he does this suggestion. He says, but this is a suggestion. So he's actually facilitating the negotiation, saying that if you do this for Hersekzadeh, he can, you know, be nicer to you. And the important fact is Ali Bey's patron is Hersekzade Ahmet Pasha himself. So they have a very close relationship. In one part, the previous ambassador Andrea Zancani referred him as the Dragoman of Hersekzade Ahmet Pasha, not the Sultan. So they have a very close relationship. So Ali is probably just saying what the Pasha wanted him to say, or he's doing an initiative on himself in order to facilitate relationships. We don't know. But the important thing is there's this flexibility of the talk. So again, after this talk, another talk with Freschi and Ali Bey say that Ali Bey told him that, Freschi told Ali Bey that, please we pray like the ones that Ian just showed, they don't command. We pray if you know, this island of Santa Maura just go away so that we can do this good arrangement. But Ali Bey told him there's no way that we can do this without the island of Santa Maura, and the negotiations in the end failed. So I will not continue on telling what had happened, but this is a good example of what a flexible position a dragoman can have, because he's not only translating, he's actually participating in the diplomatic negotiations. So again, the second case study that I would like to look on, which is the main part of this presentation actually, is the year 1514. In 1514, you can see here that Ali Bey visited Venice for the first time as an ambassador. So he was, I'm not going to tell in detail, but he was presented there very well. And after that visit, here comes the most, let's say, interesting part. We have this letter from Ali Bey himself. This is the only letter that from him that exists, unfortunately, as a translation that was sent from Constantinople to Venice after his return. So this is a letter that was written by Ali Bey to a certain Pietro Giustiniani, who is the brother of the bailo of that time, of Niccolo Giustiniani. And the letter it's a very interesting letter, even though this is a translation. So it talks about first Ali Bey's successful arrival to Constantinople, said I arrived. And then he talks about the Ottoman campaign against the Safavids, say that the Sultan started to move towards east because the Safavids are creating these problems, which the Venetians, of course, they know about it because of their wonderful news network. And here it's interesting that he says, you will hear all about this from your brother, who's a bailo. I'm not going to say anything more, even though I would like to act for the utility of the Venice. He says, I'm your friend, but better that you hear all of this from him, which suggests that he acts as a news media, he acts as a news source, but because this is a letter from him, he doesn't want to say what he learned, but he just transfer all of this to Niccolo, the bailo, and he wants the bailo to tell those. So there's an implicit way of telling the news. So he doesn't want to compromise his position. So the rest of the letter is about his request of a return of a slave, which the tone of the letter changes slightly a little bit harsher. And then he requests a certain of cloth, raso, it's a satin. And in the end, we have the most candid part when he says, I salute these patricians, Antonio Giustiniani, Leonardo Bembo, Niccolo Aurelio, and your nephews. And he salutes them in a very candid way. And he also salutes a certain Madame Lucia and two other women he danced with in the ball that you have given. So this is an interesting letter because it is a diplomatic letter, because it has news about diplomatic events. And it also a request of a return of a slave, but also it's a personal letter because it's written very candidly. As you can see, it says, Caro magnifico Missier Piero Giustiniani, and say, Vostro Ali Bey ambassador. And then in the end, there's this part sorry, where he says, you can count on me, this part, you can count on me like your brother. So this is a very kind of which, so how did this happen? So I just want to show you this thing that I prepared. So Ali Bey, so Pietro Giustiniani know Ali Bey from when he visited Venice. So Pietro Giustiniani was the person who accompanied Ali Bey throughout his visit. So that's why they got to know each other, and Pietro Giustiniani never left him alone, because the problem with when the Ottoman ambassadors visit, Venetians did not want them to tour around on their own. They're always in the house. Whenever there's this negotiations or audiences going on, they got out. But apart from that, apart from the visits that the Venetians themselves prepared, like a visit to San Marco or other places in Venice, they don't go out. They just stay in the house. And there are people who are accompanying them, like Pietro Giustiniani, which apparently in that case, they become very friendly, because he gave him this wonderful ball for him, for Ali Bey, and his entourage, of course. And there's also, in this case, there are other people who are involved in this thing. For example, Andrea Gritti and Leonardo Bembo. Andrea Gritti is a famous man. He became the Doge of Venice afterwards. He has a wonderful political career, but he knows Ali Bey from the time that these two were merchants in Constantinople and they were imprisoned there. And then when Ali Bey arrived as his first visit in 1514, he wanted to see Andrea Gritti and Leonardo Bembo above all. He just wanted to see them, talk to them, which suggests that they have an affinity. They've known each other for so long. Another important, interesting thing, let's say, from this, for example, this Francesco Contarini, who's a merchant, and in Sanuto's accounts, it was said that he was banned from visiting Ali Bey no matter what. He cannot visit Ali Bey. Francesco Contarini, and there's another guy called Francesco Gradenigo, they cannot visit him because they've known each other from the time in Istanbul, which is interesting because they say Ali Bey would probably extract some news from this Francesco Contarini. They didn't trust him, apparently, but they do trust Leonardo Bembo and Andrea Gritti, who also knew him, Ali Bey too. So he has a very good network of people, we can say. And also, for example, here, they also paid for a diamond worth of 1,000 ducats to be given as a gift to the Hersigzadeh Ahmed Pasha, who's again still in this 1514, he's still the Grand Vizier for the fourth time. And so the Council of Ten paid for this diamond, and they wanted to be given as a gift to Hersigzadeh Ahmed Pasha so that their friendship could continue to go on. So we can see the network of relationships here. So again in the 1514, as another way Ali Bey acted as a news source, apart from being an ambassador and a friend. Here, he written 2 letters from the Chaldiran side, where the war had happened, from the Ottoman camp. I'm sorry. So the first letter is written at this time. So this is 6 days after the war. He wrote this letter to Nicola Giustiniani, and unfortunately, we do not have Ali Bey's original letter. We just know what he said from what Nicola Giustiniani wrote back to Venice. And in this letter, he just said how they won the war with few casualties. You know, it's a great victory and everything. So we here can see, and at that time, of course, when the letter was written down to Nick in 2nd of October 1514, Nicola Giustiniani already knows that the Ottomans were victorious, the matter of how they were victorious. So here he commented saying that, okay, this is true, they are victorious, but not like that. It's not the casualties, it's very few, which means Ali Bey, he says Ali Bey is exaggerating, which is to show that Ali Bey is right now doing some sort of a propaganda work, which is acceptable because he's writing from the Ottoman camp. Which is the case for the second letter, which is later dated, as you can see. we don't know when Ali Bey wrote this down, but I think this is because they're turning back to Amasya, the camp, which means it's in autumn of 1514. So here, Ali Bey just, the Venetians know that there's a great famine going on in the camp, but Ali Bey just, again, lower the numbers. It's not something that is that big, and he just tell this account of how the Safavids have sent this ambassador to the Ottoman camp, who said that my Sultan Ismail, my Shah, who didn't know that you were coming. If we knew, we would prefer a greater army, but he didn't know. That's why we were beaten. And then Selim took this ambassador and bashed his head, or bashed him, which can be expected from Selim, I guess. So again, even if it is true, this is a kind of a propaganda work, which shows, again, depending on the situation, Ali Bey's role differ as well. So, and I just put these things to see how his reputation, because in order for the news from a person to be believed, at least from an Ottoman, no matter what, Ali Bey is working for the Ottomans, he has to have a good reputation. So I just put these several examples to show what they think, what the Venetians think about him. And in this case, in the first one, he says, Ali Bey, just, acting, he's acting on our behalf, because he speaks very good Italian, he speaks very good Latin, and so he's acting for the good of Venice. So, which is the case for Leonardo Bembo, who says Ali Bey was about to come to his second visit to Venice in 1517, and he says, he's a great man of great value, and you have to take care of him because his words matter a lot. Which means Ali Bey has a great reputation within the Ottomans themselves as well by 1517. So, but not all references back to him are good. For example, Sanuto himself, when he witnessed Ali Bey, when he visited the city in the second time, he says he's a sagacious, evil man who does spying for his master wherever he goes. Probably true, but I don't know about the evil side, but spying is. And Pietro Bragadin, the bailo in 1525, when he wrote that Ali Bey had died, and no one was so sad about his passing, because he's a man who wants war, because he's going to gain a profit of it. So he has a differing accounts depending on, again, on the situation and people themselves. So as a last example of, if I have time, the last example is this, for example, in these negotiations that took place in Edirne, because the court was there, because the Sultan was there, is about all these issues that goes on between the Ottomans and the Venetians. And in this case, for example, Ali Bey again acted for the Venetians, tried to say the Venetians shouldn't pay for the damages, especially for this ship affair. But there is here, in this case, there's another Pasha whose name was not given. And he just said Ali Bey to shut up and just don't interfere. And in that case, afterwards, Ali Bey stopped interfering a little bit, because the Venetians said he stopped being nicer to us. And again, in this case, there's two different other occasions where other people interfered for the Venetians, not only Ali Bey. For example, there is this Miravur, who's the overseer of the stables of the Sultan. So the Venetians gave him some present, saying that, please have a good word for us to the Sultan, because no one can reach Sultan, who's always apparently away for the hunts. And they're afraid to reach him as well, because he is Selim the first. So here they reach Miravur. They also reach the physician of the Sultan himself, Ali Çelebi, who's always with the Sultan, who they have given him gifts as well, say that please make a good word for the benefit of us. So Venetians are in a very, very desperate way to handle all these issues. And in that case, Ali Bey he doesn't help them that much, because he knows that it is against him as well. And in this case, this particular phrase by Ali Bey himself, because Leonardo Bembo, he wanted to leave as a bailo because he was afraid for his life, literally. It says, please send another bailo, my time here is over. So he says, I'm leaving Edirne to Constantinople for my health, but I have to leave someone else in my part because the viziers wanted someone from the Venetian party to leave. And he also wanted Ali Bey to interfere himself, but who was always nice to our nation, he says here, to the Venetians. But Ali Bey says, I don't want a hen that doesn't give any eggs, which means you're not profitable for me anymore, at least for now. So again, the flexibility of his situation. So to finish up, Ali Bey was not just a middle rank officer in the Ottoman bureaucracy, but he was an essential part of the early modern Venetian-Ottoman relationships. And his role just did not confine him, but instead give him a greater flexibility as a middleman and enable him to become an important asset in those talks in which we can also witness his personal affairs and interests. So he was a product of a certain mechanism, but in another way, his own personal character made his career as well. So thank you for listening.